now. And one other thing is the Urban Tree Festival relies on donations. So if you are able to donate to the Urban Tree Festival, we would very much appreciate that. It is a volunteer-led organisation, and we want to put it on again next year. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Roger. Thank you, Roger.
Thank you, Paul. That's fantastic, and welcome everybody. Thank you, first of all, to the Urban Tree Festival for letting us record all this, really, because as I was saying to Paul, it's nice to give talks about what we do, but it's very rare to get a chance to talk about the wide variety of things we've done over 14 years. And on Sunday, I gave the first talk, which covered about the Arboretum and the Warhorse project, and some things about the educational aspects of what we do, which is really important. So I'll just get on to sharing my screen, and then we can make a start. Okay. Just a minute, just hold on a sec, that's not working. Just bear with. Just hold on, just having trouble getting into this here now. Okay. Nearly there. Okay, right. So Tree Wardens Wakefield, as Paul said, we are a charter branch. Let me just get rid of that. Okay, so where we are located, really, if you took a pin and put it right in the middle of Great Britain, you'd pretty much find where Wakefield is. We're at the top of the M1 motorway where it meets the M62. So right in the centre of Northern England, really, next to the Pennines. We're just east of the Pennines. It's a nice place to live, but it's getting very built up these days. We're in the West Yorkshire conurbation, so we've got Leeds, Bradford, Halifax nearby, and it is becoming more built up. It's a very popular place to be if you were travelling into Leeds to work and things like that. And lots of industry are now basing themselves here because we're right on the centre of these transport links. What's important now, I think, as time moves on in Wakefield, is how we identify and reserve what will be the green spaces of the future and the urban green spaces of the future as the city starts to expand. Now, this is a closer up view of the city. You'll see to the left-hand side of the picture, we've got the M1 motorway coming just alongside where we are. And again, it's built up all the way through. And the city park is marked in there, that's Thorns Park. Just to the south, you'll see there are a number of lakes there, and this harks back really to our industrial heritage. Lots of mining in this area, lots of quarrying and things like this, mills, coal mines, lots of industry which have now passed away, but we've got new industries coming into the area. But mainly we are a commuter area as well for people travelling through. Now, one area within the park itself is the old nursery, which is in the corner of the city park, because years ago when Wakefield used to be the sort of the administrative city really for the old West Riding, lots of training was done here for all kinds of professions within the county, and one of them was for horticulture. And the old nursery, which is in Thorns Park, was used for training and for exams. And we get quite a few older visitors that come and that say, oh, well, came for my horticulture exams here in 1950s and that kind of thing. And this is the remnants of the old nursery in the corner of the park. You'll see there's a number of glass houses in this area, just up here. And there's one where a greenhouse used to be, if we just remember that for what we're going to see a little bit later. And then there's some workshops and potting sheds and things here. Then we've got a formal rose garden and the formal flower beds down here. And on this side, there's an area up here where we'll be looking at later we use for major deliveries of small trees where we can heal them in ready for bigger projects. So we're bringing this back to life. We're starting to use this again. It went into a demise sort of more than 15 years ago, but now we're starting to get this going again. And about 10 years ago, I was given permission by Wakefield Council because of the partnership we've developed as a Tree Wardens group with our local council. I said, look, can I use these greenhouses to develop a wildflower project which will enhance a lot of the tree planting that we're doing in the district? As I say, on the last talk, we talked about the Arboretum and one or two other sites, because when we do this planting, because we're an old industrial area, we've not just lost trees, due to the industries, but we've lost a lot of our sort of native plants and wildlife as well, and we're trying to restore that. And the pictures you see here are what the greenhouses were like when I first started to clear them out, and we started to find the benches that were inside. The weeds were up to the roof, and you see lots of the bench tops are missing, and started to get this ready for use, but they were in fairly good condition. So we started a relationship with the group which is called the Day Opportunities team, and this is for the adults who have special learning needs, who come to the council department every day to be engaged on various projects and to help to give them new skills and build confidence. So we started to open a shop for plants in that greenhouse area. And this is the view from the rose garden in through the gate that takes you into the first greenhouses. So we created an outdoor sales area just up there where you can see the tables inside there. The first greenhouse on the right became the plant sales in that area. And then the public weren't allowed beyond that. But lots of good interaction were taking place within that shop sales area for people coming in to visit and buy plants and small trees and things like this. And by the March, this is several years ago, but by the March, the shop was ready to open. And this was the report in the local paper about that opening and engaging the people on that project. Now, in the March, we opened it, and by the September, it had made enough income to pay for itself again the following year. And it's still running now several years later. It's had no major injection of cash. We started it just with a few £100 and the first plants, the first compost that we needed to start things off to get that moving, to restore this. And on the banner that's on the gate, it says, bringing the partnership, bringing the nursery back to life. And this is the same greenhouses that you saw in those first pictures that were full of the weeds up to the ceiling. And within a year, we've got lots of wildflowers that we're growing in there. Now, we don't buy them as a mix. You usually see packets of wildflower mix. We wanted specific British native wildflowers because if we wanted to enhance certain sites, we needed to be sure what we were putting in there, particularly the woodland sites and the new woodland creation projects that we were doing. On the right here, we've got wood forget-me-nots in the right-hand picture, and in the left, we've got stitchwort. But each year we were doing about 15 different kinds of British wildflowers, buying the seed from a specialist supplier, so we knew exactly what was in that packet, so we knew exactly what was going to be going out from there. Once they were of a size ready to go out to site. Now, the reason we did this was because we tried direct seeding of wildflowers onto our tree areas and things like this where we'd been planted new trees. We found that they just didn't take because there was so much competition from other plants and getting them established. Things were eating the seeds and things like this. So we wanted to create something where plants would be in there and try to get them established within those areas. So pop them out of the containers and then pack them into crates like this. So each time you would load up the vehicle to take them down to a site, meet people down there to plant the plants on those sites, you'd probably be taking thousands of plants at a time. And here we are down at the Arboretum and Numela Dam. Now, in the last talk, we talked about the Arboretum and how we restored that. And this is where our corporate engagement days come in handy as well. Because if we need lots of hands to do a certain project at a certain time of year, and I had a call only yesterday from another company that wants to come in July, that wants to help us with something. So I'm looking to put together a project for that. And these are staff from Barclays Bank. They have a conference every so many months at Leeds, and they come from Swansea and London to get together. But they always get in touch with me and say, look, can we be with you the day before so we can have a team building exercise and do some work? And they said they've been at 9 times. Nationwide Bank, they've been back 6 times. So they must enjoy it. It's not, we don't have such a hard working day that it's not enjoyable. We try and make it a sociable day as well. So we go for a nice lunch somewhere and that kind of thing, and make it an interesting day out. But the good thing as well about having corporate engagement days like this, it's not just that you've got the extra people on a weekday to get these things done. It's also that sometimes they'll actually bring some funds with them as well to help to pay for things like the yellow vests, the gloves, the tools that you need. You know, if you're doing any work on trees, it might be loppers and saws and for pruning and that kind of thing. So your corporate engagement days have been really, really important to get lots of work done in one hit, basically. Now, when we plant, these are foxgloves. Now, when we're planting the wildflowers, introducing them into a site, obviously we want them to pollinate each other. We want them to become permanent on site. So we plant them in groups. Possibly it doesn't have to be as tight as this, but just to make sure that they do get pollinated and we do get seeds remaining on the site. And this is in the neighbouring woodland as well. So it's not just in the Arboretum. This woodland as well, this is at New Miller Down, which is just outside the city. And it gets 350,000 visitors a year. And in this particular area, this was quarrying, it was coal mining up to the 1940s and 50s. So although there's lots of woodland and plantation there now, some of it's monoculture, it's going to be thinned out to become more native and let some more light in. But the diversity is just not there on what was an old industrial site. And these photographs I took this very morning down at the Arboretum. So those plants you saw going in, planted by Barker's Bank, this is now a few years later. And we're on the left, we've got alkanet. In the centre, we've got the stitchwort that we saw in the nursery bed there in the greenhouse. And then we've got the primroses that we planted down on another part of it. Now, in the Arboretum, when we did let the light in, there were obviously already one or two types of plant in there. We've got some nice vetches in there, which are in the pea family, and bees absolutely love those. So we want to encourage those as well. So by letting the light into those areas, and it has involved removing some old trees and any sick and dead trees and things like this to let the light in. This is when you can stimulate this diversity through your planting. And I'll recommend there's an arboretum in North Yorkshire, a place called Thorpe Perrow near Beedale, where I went to have a look to see how they managed their tree collection and what they put around it. And they managed it in very much the same way as we do here, by having grass paths through so you can get to the trees and see the signs on the trees and that kind of thing. But also there's lots of wildflowers going under and around the trees. So we've got lots of diversity going on. It's not just about the trees. And sometime by the end of the third year, when we were growing these things, it was so successful that by the end of the third year, in total, we estimated we produced over 70,000 plants that have gone to sites all over the north of England. And the lady on the right there on the photograph, she's the chief exec, or was the chief exec of the Woodland Trust. She's now in charge at the RSPB, and they've just created a new garden at their offices down at Grantham. So we were donating some British wildflowers to go into their garden just outside there. But also you can get them further afield, and obviously we do a lot with schools and a lot of education. And just as an example how things can sort of blossom from these conversations that we have. At this particular school, which is at Beverley in East Yorkshire, it's outside our area, but I was asked to give a talk about the trees and the Woodland Trust and things like this, and I did that the year before. And there was one particular member of staff, and in a school you only need one person that's really interested. So we'd love to create a nature area within our school grounds. So there was a corner of the field which was unusable because it was too wet and things like that. So they applied for a grant from a major supermarket, and they actually got a £10,000 grant to fence off up that area, to put a pond in it, pond dip in, that kind of thing. And then a year later, we went to the opening ceremony, and the Archbishop of York came to open it, and I took them some wildflowers over to add to that. So from those conversations that you'll have with others, if you're talking about the projects, and if you can show them, look, all these things are achievable, you know, it hasn't cost us a huge amount of money, but they had to get a contractor in to do that, then it is feasible and it can be done. Now, the other things that we do to make these green spaces even better is to do lots of things for bird boxes. As you'll see there, there's some owl boxes in the background that we're making, and the benches. Now, there's lots of benches about in parks and green spaces that have seen better days. I'm sure you've seen them yourself. So there hasn't been a policy really, because restoring benches is seen to be an unnecessary cost. And of course, for older people who want to come and enjoy these spaces and see the trees and be amongst the trees, it's a matter of getting these in the right place. Sometimes every 200 yards you need a bench where somebody can sit down. And when I've spoken to some disability groups for people that can walk with it, who need assistance, they need to sit down every so often. So this bench on the left, 3 days later, became the bench on the right. So it's quite easy to restore something like this. And the cost of a restoration like this, because we're volunteers and because we're working with the special needs group who are learning new skills and doing these things to help to build their confidence, that restoration for that particular bench would only be about £15 to get that one back in order to go back out. And where you see the one sitting in the right there, this is actually in the nursery block, the changing rooms that we created from an old tool room in the nursery. So when the service users come in to be part of their work day, as it is between 10 AM and 2 PM each day, there's a changing room there. The changing room wardrobes there were donated by another local company. You might have seen the advert on the television for Shark vacuum cleaners. They were refurbishing their offices and got into it saying, look, we're getting rid of some furniture, would you like some? So we made those into wardrobes and things like this. So the bench on the left there again becomes the bench on the right. And this one, yes, it needed some new timbers, but again, the cost for that is roofing timber. It's not hardwoods from South America or anything like that, but we stain them to look like mahogany. And it's a fairly cheap process to do this. And they go back out on site. And we did this over a 5-year period in the times when we couldn't grow the wildflowers in the springtime, when we weren't planting trees in the autumn and the winter. In the gaps in between, we could do these. And over 5 years, we worked out we'd done 201 benches have gone back into public green spaces so that people can enjoy these. And what I've noticed now, as we went for a walk around one of the parks this morning, is that more benches are being put in because I think we've got across, there's an understanding that there's not a huge cost to these things and they can be maintained by the various friends groups, by volunteers to help them keep them in good order. Now these benches, only the metal legs were found, so the timbers were put on, stained and that kind of thing. So they cost just the timber and the bolts and the stain, and they went to another urban park at Horbury just outside Wakefield. And this particular bench, all that was found were the 3 metal legs were buried in mud near some woodland, and we cast the blocks to go underneath and then the new timbers on it, and we detached the blocks underneath which can be moved on a sack trolley, and then when you get to site, reassemble it at site, and then once the bolts are tightened up, hammer the bolts so they can't be removed, and do the same with the bolts on the back of the timber so they can't be removed. And what we found is that none of these have been affected by damage. We do get some drawing on them and things like this occasionally, but they've not been vandalized. And benches like this, again, the cost is just sanding and getting those back out into the parks. If you walk in a park, that's great, but sometimes it's just nice to dwell and watch the trees, sway in the breeze and just relax and enjoy those spaces. So it's not just about the trees. And this fantastic bench here, again, all we got were the 3 metal legs. The timber was in fact decking timber, just put through a table saw in this workshop. This is up at Pennine Camp Hill Community, who have a college for adults who have special learning needs. And I did a project up there with them restoring these benches. The nice thing with this particular bench, it was a young man who was becoming very agitated because he did want to do things, but he didn't know what to do. And he assembled this bench, working with me to put it together, all the bolts and the fastenings and things like this. And the delight on his face when this bench was finished, and we could say, you did that, well done. You know, you should be really proud of yourself. And it's things like this that help to build that confidence and that self-esteem, which then boosts their ability to communicate. And we see time and time again that when we do these projects, it's not just about putting the trees in the ground, it's how we do it, how we engage with people, so they get the benefit from doing that as well. With one particular one we put into Thorns Park, and I was in the rose garden one day, and one of the service users walked in, was walking in to come and work in the greenhouses, a big smile on his face. And it wasn't normal for him to be like that. So I just said, how are you doing this morning? He says, Roger, I've just walked through the park. He says, and I get it now. I get it why we do what we do. I says, what do you mean? He says, there were a family sitting on one of our benches and their little girl said, thank you, after I told them that we'd done it. And he was so delighted with that. His attitude just seemed to change afterwards. So it's just little things like that can really help. So this is another nationwide work day. A bench actually out on site needed a new lap fitting and repainting out on in situ. So these are great for the corporate engagement days again. And then when we take benches out, we all go together to do it. So that, yes, you've done it, you've helped, and we'll take those out. On the left, we've got staff from Nationwide on another one of their days coming out of the nursery. And on the right, we've got Barclays Bank staff helping to paint the doors in the nursery, and they funded those materials for that process. Now, some of the things that we make, using some of the timber that's thinned out from the plantations that were originally put in to get timber for the mining industry in this area, which no longer exists. So this larch we make into benches like this, and this is in a school in Wakefield City. We put 4 benches in, and on the back panels of the benches we engrave the aims and values of the school. So things like respect, friendship, things like that. You'll see that as we go a little bit further. And this particular back panel that we're making in the nursery here, again, it's larch. So all you need to do, I do these myself, just print it off on the computer onto a piece of paper, because the most difficult thing is the setting out. If you ever try to write a sign and you don't do setting out, you always run out of space, don't you? When you get to the right-hand side, you've run out of lettering room. So set it out on a piece of paper, cut some of gaps out within the letter itself. You've created a template, position that onto the piece of wood, and then just dab it with a sponge with some paint or something like this to mark where you're going to be. And then this is one of the service users working obviously under supervision in the nursery greenhouse. There's lots of good light in there, chiseling out the letters to 45-degree angle to create the words on the piece of wood. And this is it when it's been finished and sanded. So it says the Carpe Diem on it. And as we know, the Carpe Diem seize the day. And this particular bench we were making in remembrance of a fantastic young man who was from a local school who had a long battle with illness, and his school friends wanted to put a bench in his memory within the school grounds. So this was the back panel. He certainly seized every day, and he came to us 3 times with his class and did different projects around in the nursery to do with wildflowers, and you'll see a little bit later the tree seed planting and things like this. And we carved his name onto the bench seat as well. That's it in place. The nice thing with this is that there was an assembly some weeks later, and where the children were talking about the do's and don'ts in the playground, you know, obviously no pushing and things like this, and to behave and all that kind of things that they do. And one of the girls from his class said, when you sit on the bench, you can sit next to Blake, but you can't sit on him. Now, I've spoken to his mum in the last few days, and it would be his 11th birthday next month, and we're going to be planting 11 oaks in his memory at a site not far from the school. So he loved nature, and his legacy will be living on through all the trees that we've planted that he's been involved in, and that we're going to be planting again this year. So the owl boxes, we will just get the diagrams from one of the sites, whether it be RSPB or the British Trust for Ornithology, gives you all the dimensions on there. And I think altogether, I can't remember whether we've done we've certainly more than 16 of these have gone out to various sites. And this is how we get some of our money back, really, when we're doing these things, because obviously there's a cost to the timber. So some of these we will put out on sites of our own, and there's, you know, we can't recoup the cost from that. But let's say if another group gets in touch and they have some funds, we'll say, look, can we have a donation for this box? And we give them an idea of what it's cost us, and usually they're very generous, and we get some of that funding back. So when we can plough that back into more projects and more bird boxes. So this is near to completion, ready for going out. As you can see on there, you can just see a tawny owl there. And this is within about 500 yards of the M1 motorway. When you saw the quarries on the picture at the start of the map, that were near to the M1 motorway, just passing Wakefield. And this is, you can hear the traffic from where this box is. So it's great that when you can see that these boxes are working, and when we get feedback from other groups that have put the boxes up and they've had success, it's fantastic. Now, when we put them up, obviously there's a risk in all these things that we do, and we do risk assessments for everything we do. And this isn't me up the tree. This is the one of the forestry officers from Wakefield Council. And this is what's so important about networking, and what's so important about the partnership working that we do. None of us have got the skills to do everything that we'd like to do. So on these occasions for this, the forestry team were trained to climb trees and to work on trees. They can help to get these boxes up. And there's 3 boxes here that went onto the city golf course, which you can also see, which is near to the location of the previous one, not too far from there. And I was allowed to take with me one of the young men who worked from the Day Opportunities team, to help to put these boxes up. So we could help to winch it up the tree using a rope, and then the forestry officer could fix it up there and make it safe and that kind of thing. And the nice thing with this one is that within 3 months of this box going up, 2 chicks were coming out of it. Now I was chuffed to bits about that, so excited that it's worked, you know, we've got another successful box. But just imagine how the young man felt, who had never done anything like this before, but had now made a box which was improving wildlife in his local area. So again, it's that participation and that extra icing on the cake, really, when we're doing these projects, that pays back. Lots of bat boxes. I've lost count of the number of bat boxes we've made that have gone out to various locations. This is for pipistrelle bats, but we've also been asked to make specialist boxes for other types of bat where a habitat has been under threat, and we can make those to design at fairly short notice. And then when the tree team come in each day from Wakefield Council and they dump their logs, you know, when they've been removing trees, or they've had to take a tree down like this one, as you can see, it was hollow and it was in danger of falling over. So pieces like this we can make into other things. So this one becomes a hedgehog box, and it would just be stuck in the corner of a garden, covered in branches and leaves, and there you've got some habitat for a hedgehog, and it's cost the little piece of wood on top. The signs for the Arboretum, we remade those. I mentioned in the first talk, but they were also made in this workshop, again from the larch. It was thinned out from the plantations on the outskirts of the city, and then all the signs put on there. And I just had a phone conversation about an hour ago with somebody in Wakefield Council saying, did you realise that the Arboretum is being used for arboriculture students who want to learn to identify trees? Well, that's fantastic. That's exactly why we did that project. Not just to educate children and for families to learn about trees as they walk around the Arboretum, but by making these signs conspicuous like this, then you can easily find out what a tree looks like and build up your own knowledge. As I said, there's 113 different ones on that site. The signs, these are acrylic, and they're made by Timpson's, your shoe repairer on the high street, but they also do engraving, and they have a factory that does that. And if you get in touch with them, they'll do this. If you're getting a lot done, they'll get them done at a very, very reasonable price. And they've been very good to us. Now, in the greenhouses as well, we didn't just do education about plants and growing wildflowers and things to do with trees, as you'll see very shortly. But one of the schools wanted to do a project about water conservation and that kind of thing, and how water is used. So one of the greenhouses, we cleared it out and they made an exhibition space, and they had a public exhibition, years 3 and 4, about the various uses of water, and they did 8 different displays within there to engage people with about how important water is, how fortunate we are to have such a fantastic quality of water that just comes through the tap, but also how it's used in different parts of the world and different plants and trees, and how they use water and the water cycle and all that kind of thing. So they did a really practical job there in educating others about the water cycle. Now, another way that we raise money, and this is a bit of an off-the-wall one, really. I was asked by the city centre businesses to come have a walk round with them around the city centre, say, look, how can we improve the city centre for greenery, for trees, for plants and things like this? And in the walking round there, we saw the litter bins. And the brown one you can see on the left here in the centre there, look, that's what they were like in the city centre. So I said, look, if you can get those down to the nursery workshop this winter, we'll clean those off, I'll pressure wash those off, and we'll repaint them and we'll put them back out. And they said, look, if you can do that, we will make a donation of £2,400 to Wakefield Tree Wardens. Now that £2,400 has gone on to fund 2 major tree planting projects. One of 1,500 trees planted by high school students at Hemsworth, just outside Wakefield, and another one which became the Kettlethorpe Estate project, which later won the Environmental Award from the Civic Society in Wakefield. So even just pressure washed, it looks grey like that, but there's some rusty bits, as you can see at the bottom. And then once it's just done with a roller, just a small roller, just it's a satin black metal paint to cheer those up. And then a label's put on them to show the partnership working together to make the city centre a better place. Tree Warden John on the left of this picture in the sort of the body warmer, he's a painter and decorator, so he could advise on the type of materials we could use. So it's all these skills we've got between us that we help to make these things happen, to improve things for our city, but also to make some funds that we can recycle within the community to make things a greener place. Now, some of those benches, this is Harry Lodge, who was president of Wakefield Angling Club for about 50 years, Harry, a smashing fella, and he's done masses for the community, engaging people to do with it, fishing and getting in touch with nature. And some of the benches go out to their sites, and they will fund some of these benches to go there. So this is one Sunday morning, getting them loaded up to take down to the vehicle to load up. Now, the two gentlemen on the left there, there's Harry and John, and they won't mind me telling you, but their total ages at that time was around 160. So it just shows that it's never too late to get involved in these projects. We got the benches out to site. Sue is on the right. Now, Sue is the countryside officer for Wakefield Council, and Sue covers a number of sites. We've got a few countryside officers, but they've all got about a dozen or more sites to look after. So if she's got volunteers at different sites that can be involved, it's great that we can help her with that. I think somebody's just come on that's got the microphone on. If you can just switch that off, that'd be lovely. Thank you. So we can get these in place. And that's Harry just enjoying the view. Now, where we are there, you'd think we were in the countryside, but we're between the M1 motorway and the city. And up behind the big trees on the left there, where we've had a few more trees at the bottom, up on the left there, there's 4 busy railway lines there. And on the previous talk, I explained how we'd put a hawthorn and blackthorn hedgerow in there to help keep kids off the railway tracks. This is down another site looking towards the M1 motorway. And this is how we put them in. So we assemble them, dig the holes, slide them in, backfill it, and it's done. And these gentlemen are part of the Friends group for this particular site. So it's not us that's trying to do all this. We're just helping each other, working with each other to get all these different sites improved. And you can see the M1 motorway there just in the distance. This is one of the quarries that was a sand quarry. And underneath the sand, there was coal as well. So some of these holes could be quite deep, but now they're full of wildlife, great for fishing and leisure, walking around them, ideal. You see a swan there in the background. Now, back in the nursery, if you remember the area that was a derelict greenhouse that had been flattened, this is what we've put on it now. So we realised we could make some raised beds in this area. So we've got disabled access through it, and we put a path all the way through the middle, using the flagstones that were already there. But we're not bricklayers. We couldn't lay the bricks. So again, this networking, this partnership working, spoke to Wakefield Council. The bricks were donated by a building company that were building some social housing about a quarter of a mile away. And at the end of the job, there's some different coloured bricks left. They delivered them round to us. We could do the labour to get the bricks around where they needed laying. And then we got apprentices to come in from the Housing Association with their trainer to build the walls. And I know myself is that when they're training to be bricklayers, they do them at college, and at the end of the day, they have to kick the wall over. And this was the first time they had actually built a wall which was going to be staying and having a purpose. And I said, look, you can do any patterns you like. I know you've got to do different bonds and different patterns for your exams. Do whatever you want, and then you can photograph it as part of your qualifications. And they did that. They were here about 3 weeks building this wall around it and making a nice growing area so we could use that for some of our trees as well. And when we opened it, we had a school visit in that day. So we had a plaque made for the children. They mentioned on the plaque, it was these 2 particular children, it was their birthday that week. So they were chosen to unveil the plaque, and then we could all see that open. Because the message we want to get across is, we don't own this. This is not in our possession. This is for them. This is their future. This is a community resource. And you'll see very shortly that how we use that. And in the summertime, we've got beetroot and peas and carrots and all kinds of things there. In the autumn and winter, that's where we process some of our trees that we have going through there. And sometimes we keep one bed to make them last a bit longer. The picture on the left is within that one of those beds in the autumn, the tree delivery. And if you're buying trees, these are in bundles of about 25 or 50, depending on the species. And when you're buying small trees like this, you buy them as what we call bare-rooted wicks. They're the cheapest. So there's no soil on them. But as soon as they arrive in the crate, they need putting straight into the ground and keeping wet. So we'll give them a watering as soon as they're healed into this bed. That's the process of it. You dig a trench, bob them in, and then you press the soil around the roots with your heel. to keep them nice and fresh. And they can stay like that for quite a while until you're ready to take them back out, to take out to site to plant. And the picture on the right is Tree Warden Christine standing at the other bed that we have at the top of the park. And this is stock purchased by Wakefield Council. 10,000 trees were purchased, ready to go out to 5 different sites. And these would be our addition in our district to the new Northern Forest. And the Northern Forest is stretching from Liverpool over to Hull. It's about 60 miles wide. And over the next 25 years, the aim is to add 50 million trees across the north of England, whether it be urban trees or rural trees, just to get lots more trees into that area for all the benefits that that will bring. So this is just the start of that process, and we've started getting those in. The tools I found best to use, not the traditional square spade that involves a lot of bending and things like this. The ones on the left there, they're sort of they're used for digging drains and things like that. I find these really good for planting trees, very easy to push into the ground because they're fairly pointed. The ones on the right, the 2 on the right, they're a smaller version. You can buy those. They're called a rabbit spade. Now, these are great for the kids to use because they're a shorter handle, because they've got more of a point to them as well. I don't know if you've ever seen this, but if you give a child a standard spade and they try to push it in the ground, they can be standing on it. It's just not going anywhere. It can't penetrate the grass or the ground because they're so small and light. But these spades, we find them much easier to get in. Now, if you're digging bigger holes and deeper holes to plant bigger trees, the digging adze in the middle is ideal with the longer handle. So you can loosen the soil with the spade on the left and use the adze to lift the soil out to prevent any bending. And if you're planting a lot of trees like we have over the years, you'll know that you need to be as ergonomic as possible when you're doing these things. So we found the digging adze really, really useful. This is back in the bed now at the nursery, and this is towards the end of the planting season. And this is surplus stock that we've not been able to get in over that winter. So we need to preserve it for the following year, for the following November. So we'll pop it back into this permanent bed on the right and keep them in there ready for taking out the following planting season. And during the summer, that's what it looks like pretty much at the moment. These are not the same trees, this is from a couple of years ago, but they're ready. You can see some small oaks in there and all kinds of things waiting to go out again. And when they are ready to go out, we can just lift those trees. We don't pull them straight out of the ground because that can damage some of the hairy root system. Push a large fork or a spade underneath the tree root system, lever it up so it loosens the soil around it. So you're taking a nice, healthy, hairy root system with you. And this is another team from Nationwide, I think this was. And we were going out to a site, actually in the city itself. You wouldn't think so, but actually we're still in the city of Wakefield here. If any of you have ever been through on the train through Wakefield, Westgate Station to Leeds, that's at the top of the embankment to the left there. Westgate Station is sort of centre of the picture and behind the trees. And this site here, it used to be a quarry. It was filled with a material that you wouldn't want houses to be on top of. So with some we're given permission to green it up, working with Wakefield Council and the staff from Nationwide to put blocks of trees on there to try and make it a more of a natural space and make it more into a parkland. Now, when I'm working with the tree officers within Wakefield Council and with the forestry team, these are the kind of maps that I'll be given. And we'll go out for a site visit to have a look at projects. I've just put 2 examples up here what we might tackle. So the one on the left here, this is Notton Woods. Now, Notton Woods was a plantation of beech trees, again, planted for its timber. But now that's become more of a leisure site, a place to have a walk around, that kind of thing. But what we wanted to do is make it more diverse. So with the forestry manager, we went down, had a look at it, and it sort of on the path edges and things like this, we were able to plant a more diverse mix of British native trees to get more nature in there. And this is where we engage groups like an organisation called Open Country. Now, Open Country, they actually lodge now with all their equipment within the nursery. They have a building within there, and we welcome them into Wakefield to work with us as a charity, because they take people who have special learning needs out into the countryside to engage with nature and engage on projects. And with this particular one on the left, we were able to go down there on more than one occasion and plant lots more native trees to make that woodland diverse. The one on the right, when it says Shawcross Beetup, Shawcross is a location between Wakefield and Dewsbury. As you can see from the map, it's heavily built up all the way around it. But again, it's a site that could never be built on because of what's underneath it. But some years ago, permission was given to put lots more trees on there to reduce the amount of water running through it. And you can see the little green areas, what we call the beating up areas. And what beating up is after we've done a planting, it may well be we might have to revisit for years afterwards to replace any losses. Losses sometimes by drought, it could be vandalism. In this case, on this particular site, there are lots of voles on site, and the voles are eating the bottoms of the stems of the trees. So on this occasion, we had to put some short guards around the bottom of them to keep the voles off. And this is on that site. You would think you're on a hill in the countryside, but you're not. You're in a heavily built up area. And this particular school that's featured here, Horbury Junior School, when I spoke to them in school about the project we're going to be doing, about the benefits for nature, the head teacher insisted that every single child in the school was given the opportunity to come, even though they were 2 miles away. So in their school minibus, they rotated it every 45 minutes, and another 15 children came up to site, and we repeated the session over and over again over about, I think it took 7 or 8 days altogether. We were overlooking the recycling centre. We could talk about that. We talk about sustainability and what these trees would do for the environment and for the water would be running off this site, because where they live, there are issues with flooding. So all those things they were helping to combat. And after the end of it, we got 360 school children from their school through this project, but also local colleges, junior schools walked down to it, and they planted far more trees than we expected. Each child, even in the short time that we're there, we're managing to get about 20 trees in each. And it became a bit of a competition, really. How many more can we get in? It wasn't ploughed, but what the forestry team, they did a thing called ripping it with a straight blade. So it cut a line in onto the spacing. So all we had to do is push a spade in, lever it, so we get the gap to push the tree in. The children would stamp around it, and that was another one in. Each one would only take a few seconds to get in the ground, working in pairs. But we also try to make these events really special. So when it's running up to Christmas, yeah, we'll invite Santa along. This is on a weekend event, so we invite other families as well. So schools, yes, they'll be separate on their occasions, but then on a weekend, if families want to come, and the story, particularly with this one, I always ask people, because we don't get a big turnout to these things when they're open to the public. And this lady brought her 2 children. And I said, what brings you here to join us? She says, well, when I was at school with my husband, we were able to plant a tree at Batley with a chap called David Bellamy. I don't know if anybody remembers him. He used to be on the television with nature programs and things. And we've enjoyed watching that tree grow. We want our children to have that same experience. We want our children to enjoy watching these trees grow, and they'll drive past it probably most days to see it. So it's fantastic that they can do that. And here's a son putting the oak tree, which could live, as you know, for several hundred years, adding their tree to that site. And the gifts that we got, also sustainably sourced gifts, so things like pencil cases made from old bicycle tires, and erasers and FSC accredited pencils and things like this. Getting that message across about not just trees, but sustainability. And then on one occasion, the charter, the Woodland Trust Tree Charter, if you want to look that one up, on the 30th of November 2019, nationally there was an event to plant as a part of the big climate fight back. We needed to add more trees to Shawcross, so that was going to be the venue, adding 2,000 more trees to that site. The trees arrived, and this time, this is back within our nursery. And on this occasion, our nursery was going to be the hub for other community groups to collect their trees for the big climate fight back. So that helps the Woodland Trust in that they haven't got the cost in sending trees to lots of separate locations, but also it helps us to network with those groups when they come along. And there was Leeds University came in, and there were some came from Sheffield and things like this. And it helps the trust to save funds as well and be more sustainable in how these trees are delivered. And again, they're just healed into that bed. When we're going out to site, put 50 into a bag, and these are compost bags that we've used in the nursery. A mix of 50 trees in each bag with the tubes and the canes to help to support those trees. And then as people come onto site, they can take one bag, and we've got people to help to direct them up to various locations to plant. And again, this is where the networking comes in. Yes, we have a few tree wardens. We're only a small group, and some of our group are elderly, and they're great at being, the administrative jobs and tasks and things like this. But the local Rotary Club, who have been great working with us, I contacted them, and they acted as marshals for the day to assist with the parking, with the access road down to the old tip, which was now the old recycling centre, which was now finished with. So we could park cars down there. We got access to all that through the council to be able to get this done. And lots of people came to plant trees. I think we had about 70 odd people came in over a 3-hour period. And would you believe 2,000 trees went in within 3 hours? And that's about the length you want for a project, for a day's project. It doesn't want to be hard work, because as you can see, it can be windy up on site. This is on the same day. So we've got frost and cold in the morning, wind about an hour later, and then the sun came out later on before people finished their day. And this is one family, Mrs. Ward and her family, helping to plant their trees up on that site, beating up on that site. But before they leave, get the message across about the trees so these kids can learn more about those trees and how they want to help again. Because by keeping that project short for that day and enjoyable, they'll want to do it again. So it hasn't become such hard work for that session. So you're building up onto what hopefully will be a lifelong interest in getting involved with nature and planting trees. Now, on to the tree seed side of things. In this part of Yorkshire, and we're in the season at the moment, it's fantastic. This blossoms out at the moment, and it's for the hawthorn trees. So lots of hawthorn in this area was used as hedgerow. We're not the part of Yorkshire that has lots of dry stone walls. That's a little bit further north. But where we were, the stock, like the cattle and the sheep, were kept in the fields with hawthorn hedgerows, and there's lots of it. And as you know, that blossom is fantastic for nature, for pollinating insects in the springtime. But when it gets to autumn, there's lots of lovely juicy berries on there. And this lovely little bird comes over from Scandinavia across the North Sea, and it loves to come to Yorkshire for its holidays in winter. Because over in Scandinavia, it gets quite cold, as you know. And I took this photograph at the end of my street. Can you remember when we had digital cameras before we had phones? And I was able to get this picture of this waxwing in a hawthorn tree, because they like to eat hawthorn berries and lots of other berries. And they pop them in like Smarties. They absolutely love them. And as you know, hawthorn berries, they've got a single seed. The ones in this area, Contagious monogyna, got a single seed inside that's like a little stone. And the tree has been so clever in wrapping its seed in a tasty fruit so that a creature will eat it, carry it off somewhere else, and by the time it wants to pass through its system, it's probably 2 or 3 miles away, and it's been delivered with a nice little bit of fertilizer as well. Now, we can't do that, can we? But we can help to process some seeds ourselves, and this is hawthorn. I'm sitting on a nice day in my back garden, squeezing the seeds out of the hawthorn berries. You can do this by mashing them as well. If you've got an old potato masher or something like this and a bowl of water, you can mash them in the water and then put the sort of mash that you've created into a sieve or something like this and wash all that fruit off until you've got the seeds that are left. And then I just let them air dry for a few hours on this tray. This is an old tin lid, just turned upside down so you can scrape the seeds off onto the edge of the tray, let them air dry a bit. And once they've dried a little bit, get 2 sheets of sandpaper, put the seeds in between, and then rotate the sandpaper so it takes the last bit of fruit off and the covering, because that fruit, it has a chemical within it that helps the seed to go some distance before it germinates. So you need to get that fruit off so that the seed can germinate somewhere. Now, you can grow these on, but the best thing to do before that is to expose it to some cold. Now, you might want to put that in the fridge or something like this to start off that process of germination. But also what I tend to do with these particular ones is just to go and plant them in the locations where I want them to be. So it might be gaps in hedgerows and things like this, just to help them to get into the right place. Because the one that we find more successful to work with for the education aspect, because kids want to see a result, they want to see a success with what they're doing, is acorns. And this is the native oak tree, Quercus robur. You can tell it from the peduncle there, the little stalk that's going up towards the cup. This one's very green, it's not ripe yet. When they start to turn brown, if you touch that acorn with your thumb, it will just roll out of the cup into your hand. Because if you pick them up off the ground, it's quite possible that an insect has already got inside it and started to burrow its way in. So the best thing to do is when you take it home, is drop them into a bucket of water, All the acorns that sink to the bottom of the bucket, they are the good ones, the solid ones with lots of energy inside. And the ones that they've floated on top, they've probably got some hollowness in them, so you can discard those. And the bigger the acorn, the better, because that energy within that acorn for the first few months is the energy that will help it to grow before it gets its leaves out. And these acorns here, which are grown in these milk containers, these are only 1 year old. So these were started in the October. So seed collecting season is sort of 23rd of September to 23rd of October is the rough dates, really. But you can find them around those dates. And the acorns, you get them straight in. And the way that you cut this container is cut the top off, as you can see with the scissors, or if you're doing it yourself, a Stanley knife, but leave the handle so that when you overfill the container, the water goes back down the hollow handle and back into the bottom of the container. Snip around the bottom of the container about 6 times so it's got some good drainage. And the soil mix in it, use ordinary soil, no peat or anything like that, ordinary soil. But what I do as well is mix some gritty sand with it. And you can get that from the builder's supply. It's either grit sand or river sand, and it's used for putting on the block paving, underneath block paving and that kind of thing. And it creates lots of good drainage, but also it creates a nice hairy root system. Now, the nice thing with these containers is the depth. If you put them in a shorter container and you don't get much depth, when you plant them out at site, and as we've had recently, we've got lots of rain at the moment, but when we've had the dry summers, spring and summers that we seem to be getting more regularly in this part of the world, is that the root systems aren't getting their toes down into some moisture. So if you can get a nice longer root system, the better for that first few seasons. And here we've got the children from a local school doing just that, planting those acorns, 2 into each bottle. They brought the bottles along, 2 into each container, ready to grow. And we've got one tree there that's just overlooking that situation. Off we go, starting them off. And then we've got cover them up with a net so they don't get predated by squirrels and mice and things like that. And also do this in school as well. You can create these projects in school. And by the following May, about now, this is when they'll be coming up. A few weeks later, they'll look like this. And you can also do them in the Tetra Pak containers, keep them nice and deep. And then finally, we're moving on to the interfaith event that we have in Thorns Park, totally different tack. So for the last 11 years, we've helped the local faith group to bring people together, and it's usually in or around National Tree Week, to plant a tree, to get together, get people together, different faiths, to create a better understanding within our community. The mayor likes to come as well, and there's local school children. And each year we have a different tree that we plant. And what we found is we're creating a circle of trees in Clarence Park in Wakefield. If we can also, we'll tag it into another event where we can plant lots of small trees as well. And the reason why we do all these things, this diverse reason why we do all these different projects, is for the future of these children. And these children are from a local school. The teacher got in touch with me and said, Roger, they've just done the SATs, year 6 class, they've done the SATs, they're bouncing off the walls. Can we take them for a walk out of the city? So we did, and then back through the city park and enjoying this tree. They helped on that day to put some willow into a damp area, just pushing the branches in. But they've worked on projects over years. They know that they can take action to improve things for trees. So this is what it's all about. So I know it's been a bit of a whistle-stop tour there, but we've covered all kinds of things. If anybody ever wants to get in touch with me about any of the projects that we've done, we've got some questions now, I'm sure. But if ever you want to get in touch, my number is 07973 421146 or parkinsonr78@gmail.com. And I'll be happy to talk with you about these projects or anything that you're doing to stimulate some ideas on how you can make it happen. So thank you very much for that, everybody. I'll go back to Paul now if there's any questions coming through.
Well, thank you very much, Roger. That was brilliant. And I think we've had quite a lot of things coming through in the chat. So I picked out a couple of things there. First of all, well, people from all over the world joining. You'll be pleased to hear that. Manish came from India, and also Aidan called in from County Wicklow in Ireland as well. We've had Jenny ask, how many wardens are there in the Wakefield group?
Well, literally, when we started this group in 2007, there were only about 6 people turned up. And although I'm the only original one that's remaining, we're still only a handful of people. But I think what we've been good at is this networking, this able to connect with others. So we facilitate the project. Yes, we'll raise the funds, we'll find the trees, we'll get the locations to plant working with the local council, but then we'll organise a project with the nearest schools or with a college or with a company or something like that, so we can get these trees planted. And I think the total so far, and if I mentioned this already, I think over 14 years, we've managed to add around 57,000 trees to the Wakefield district.
That's very impressive. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Sam from the Tree Council said that it was inspirational, which I completely agree with. And thanks you for all the tree wardens for the work that you've been doing in the local community. And Alicia is asking whether you could put the details into the chat, maybe your email address, perhaps. Maybe she wants to get in touch with you. I didn't jot it down myself, so I can't remember it.
I'll just say that again. So it's parkinsonr78@gmail.com.
Right, I'll just type that in for you. So if anybody wants to get in touch with Roger, that's his email address. And so there was Rihanna said, thank you for that. It was a wonderful display of community, and I agree, it really was. It seems like you have a wonderful community in Wakefield that is really focused around tree planting and or the tree propagation as well. So
can I just say, Paul, is that it's trees that have helped to create that.
Yeah,
I can say that some of that wasn't there before in some aspects, like working with the council. If I'd have gone to them, years before, the door probably wouldn't have been open. But because we've had so much success, and it breeds more success, is that those doors are open and we can have those conversations about where we go next, how we protect different spaces, how we enhance green spaces, so they know we've got a good relationship, we can build on that.
Yes, that sounds great. And it seems like it's the thing which really does, as you say, bring community together. And Shamali is asking about the monitoring initiatives of trees planted. So how do you look after them? How do you ensure they keep on growing and flourishing?
Well, the important thing, and this is the good thing about being established as a tree council group who liaise with your local council, is that you are working with the local tree officers. Our department is called the Street Scene Department. So when you plant those trees, they are logged onto the council mapping system that they exist. If you put those trees out and you didn't do that, it may well be that they may be wiped out for some reason later for building or whatever. But your trees will be logged on the system because you have done it in partnership with the council and the consent was obtained before you did the planting and that kind of thing. That creates a better future for that tree to start with. But then, because we've got the arboricultural team in the council anyway, and a part of a conversation I've had this morning on the phone is one of the tree officers that does the manual work visited the Arboretum. And he said, oh, Roger, tree so-and-so, it could do with the straps loosening a bit, or it could do with this, that kind of thing, or we can run around it with the mower, that kind of thing. Those conversations help to point out the problems. And as I say, as we know, we're getting lots of more drier seasons. How we do that watering, we can help with that. Talk to the kids about that, and perhaps one of the walks out might be taking water out to water trees that we planted some months before. So it's an ongoing thing. So we don't just plant them and forget. It's about getting them in, do some mulching as well, and that's what we do a lot of now, is we've got lots of wood chip material is brought in from tree pruning and things like this, again from the council. And on one site, we've just planted 2,400 small trees on. Every single tree has got about 1 metre of mulch all the way around it. We've put 15 trailer loads of wood chip mulch around those trees, which will help them in their future. So it's that kind of thing. So although I'm not a professional with trees, I've learned a lot over the years, but you're working with professionals that can help you and guide you and assist you with these different things that you might need.
Great. Well, that sounds like you've really got that part of it sorted as well. So I think there's one more question from Jenny. Has your group been involved in projects planting in streets and within residential areas?
Well, this is always really difficult to get trees into streets, and I do get people contact me because sometimes it's easier to contact me about trees than it is the council as well. So there's a communication thing there as well we can help with. So if a street tree has been removed, it might well be, is my tree going to be replaced? So I can raise that with the council. So to make an awareness that, look, this tree is wanted within the community. You know, you're not going to be putting something in that people don't want. Please, can we make sure one goes in there? But to get new trees in, we're looking at new developments and things like this, and looking to sort of make sure that they are added from the start, whether they're part of the gardens of the new developments or the offices or wherever it might be, or we can work with those companies to get some trees put nearby. So it's again, trying to get in on the ground level and having those conversations early on to get the trees in, because as you'll appreciate, where we are, we're an expanding area, and we want to sort of tie up those spaces already for greenery before they become developed. But also make sure when the development does happen, we get some greenery added as well. We've got a close relationship with some of our councillors, and one who's deputy leader now, a young man who you know, that we work really closely with. He has portfolio for action on climate change. So again, working with the professionals, but working with local politicians as well, and lobbying to make sure that this is kept up on the agenda, that we want to look after these spaces.
Great. Well, I think it's inspirational, Roger, and thank you so much. I think that concludes the questions. I'd just like to say that Roger's other talk that he did for the Urban Tree Festival, which was improving brownfield sites, which I unfortunately missed, is available on our YouTube channel. It was published during this talk, so hot off the press, and I'll certainly be having a look at that. This one will be appearing on our YouTube channel. I can't say when. I know we've got bit of a backlog of recorded talks to get through at the moment, so hopefully within the next few days. Thank you again, Roger, and thank you everybody for coming. If you are able to donate, it really helps the Urban Tree Festival. We rely on donations. I'll just put the link into the chat. The suggested donation is £5 for one of these talks. I hope that you'll be able to enjoy some of the other talks we've got lined up over the next 3 days. So today is we've got 4 days including today, but Friday, Saturday and Sunday yet to go. We've got a load of exciting things coming up. I myself will be doing one tomorrow evening, so do join that, where we'll be slugging out with Matthew Frith, who's the Director of Conservation at the London Wildlife Trust, about which is the true tree of London, the hornbeam or the London plane. I'm supporting the London plane, but we'll see how that goes. Matthew is a far more knowledgeable conservationist than I am. Anyway, enough about me. Thank you again, Roger, and thank you everybody for joining the festival, and we hope to see you over the coming days and next year as well. So goodbye everybody, and thanks again for joining.